Welcome back to Call Me By Your Game, the podcast where I, your host, Connor McCabe, bring on a guest to hear from them about a meaningful or memorable video game from a particular moment in their life. On the show, you might know that we talk to our guests as much about what makes playing the game that they bring on special, and also take a moment to dive into the context of how and when they had this connection with it in the first place. A little bit of housekeeping up top is that anything that my guest or I plug today on the podcast can be found in the show notes. So wherever you're listening or watching, possibly on YouTube, if you scroll down in the show notes, you're going to see some nice, gorgeous links that I've created for you, whether that be a podcast, a YouTube channel, a Twitch stream, or even a Patreon. If you scroll over there and check that stuff out, it's pretty easy to find. One of those things that I'll promote right now is our upcoming Games Club for the first quarter at Super NPC Radio, where we are going to be playing through 2019's Control. For me, for the first time, so we're going to go through that in a book club style format over, at this point, roughly 11 weeks. So if that's something you want to check out, it's going to live on our Patreon, and there'll be a free episode in this feed in about a month. So check that out. But that'll do it for the housekeeping for today's episode. And I'll finally introduce our guest for this one. Please welcome podcast producer Kevin Bartelt.
What's up, man? Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thank you for having me because we happen to be, for the video, viewers, they're already going nuts because they see we're in a gorgeous podcast space that you call your home?
Yeah, I've been calling this the Chef's Kitchen. I go by Chef Kevin on Hollywood Handbook, and so we're trying to come up with a good name for this studio space. And it's leaning, some people have been calling it the Shack. I like Chef's Kitchen.
Yeah, that classes the place up a little bit.
Yeah,
yes.
Feels a little nicer. But I've had this for about 6 months now, and it's been fun recording some pods in here and trying to get some Twitch streams going in here too. So it's been really cool.
I love it. It's really taking me back because when I first started doing the show, we would record. I was telling you all about my friend Jeremy Schmidt.
Yep.
We used to record in this little room in his house at the time that was probably half as big as this, but we also made it work.
Wow.
And it's been a while since on this show, I haven't been looking at a guest or a computer screen.
It's so intimate.
It is. I like it.
I'm trying to get better at it. I've had a few people in here that I've interviewed, and I've been called out for like bad eye contact.
Oh, sure.
Because I'm just, it's so much easier with Zoom because you're just looking at the general screen.
Yes.
It just doesn't feel like you're like locking eyes with someone like you are now. And then so when I started having people in person here, I was like, oh man, I have to like relearn the skill of eye contact.
Yeah, it is challenging. It feels like a whole different set of skills from then just having a conversation with someone in person.
Yep.
It's something about engaging in a sort of presentational format that might be why it's weird.
The other thing that I will do is when I'm like deep in a thought, I will look off to the side.
Yes.
But sometimes I will just kind of stay in that thought of like, all right, now what do I say next? And then I realize like, oh, I haven't looked at anyone at all in several minutes. And then a nice commenter pointed out, most of us are just listening to this, so you don't have to keep calling out that you're not good at eye contact.
As we have this whole preamble conversation about it. Well, regardless, Kevin, I think it's okay for us both to have permission to sometimes look at each other today.
That's good. I'm gonna start wearing like big aviators or something.
Yeah, just then it will be out of sight, out of mind. Like I said, I'm so excited to have you on the show and to be doing this today. You and I know each other pretty much through how I know majority of the guests on this podcast, through the comedy improv scene in Los Angeles, through UCB. But more specifically, our connection is through our dear friend Matt Apodaca.
That's right.
Who, when we met, you and I met last year, we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary of meeting.
Friendiversary.
Yeah, friendiversary at dear Carl Tart's birthday at Birds.
Yeah.
You introduced yourself, and immediately when you said, I'm Kevin, it all clicked because I've heard Matt talk about you so much.
And we are recording this on Carl Tart's birthday.
Oh,
That
if this isn't appropriate.
Yeah.
Now I feel a little less bad than asking you to push one day to do the show. But we met then, got to connect briefly, and then Matt decided to make the whole last year about himself.
Of course.
Have a bachelor party and get married. And that's where, we got to just actually hang out and spend some time together.
That was a blast. And then I got to listen to your podcast I've really been enjoying. And I love having an excuse to, not that you've created a show as an excuse to talk about video games, but any excuse I have just to do an hour-long conversation or more about video games, I'm like, please sign me up.
Huge, yeah.
It feels so good.
And I'll tell you, it is kind of why I created the show over 5 years ago. It's that, but it's also like, as we'll, I'm sure, see is the case today, it's a really great chance for me to connect with both people that I am really close with, that I barely know, or people that I've gotten to know better this year.
Absolutely.
Like yourself.
Nice.
So I'm pumped to have you on, but Kev, we know, I introduced you as a podcast producer.
Yep.
What do you want to share with the listeners about yourself? And is there anything you want to promote while we're here?
The main thing I'm going to be, I don't want to say focusing on because it sounds like I'm shots fired to everyone else I work with. But one of the things I'm going to be focusing on this year is I'm getting a lot more into Twitch.
Yes.
And so I've been doing a thing on there that's also on YouTube called Podcast Simulator, which actually is a game where I, for each guest, create a custom podcast just for them.
Yes.
Where there are critical moments that they have to decide what happens next. And they can vote on like, okay, I think we should do this. And then they can vote incorrectly and then the game just ends where it's like, the show got canceled. Sorry.
Yes.
A more aggressive host producer, and I've always chickened out on doing this, is when the person votes incorrectly, I've been very tempted just to say like, that's it. Is there anything you'd like to promote? And then I'm just going like, that's it. That's the show. But I always chicken out and go like, all right, let's go back and start over.
Sure.
So, that was inspired by all the simulator games. And I liked the train simulator one. That's how I got introduced to it. I liked Power Wash Simulator.
Oh, yeah.
Very like soothing simulator ones are very enjoyable to me. And I was thinking about, what would be kind of like my spin on something like that. And then that's where I was like, well, all I do on Twitch is talk about podcasting. Even when I'm playing like Grand Theft Auto, I'm trying to like clear a gap in a golf cart. I'm like, the problem with dynamic ad insertion is, so then that's when I was like, oh, I should do like a podcast simulator. Yeah. So basically, long story long is, on Mondays, I've been doing this thing called Podcast Simulator. I'd love to have you on. I think it'd be super fun.
Would be so down.
And then it comes out on YouTube like a week or two later.
Nice.
So that's kind of the main thing is, twitch.tv/Chef Kevin. And then if you just type in Kevin Bartelt on YouTube, it should be hopefully the first thing that pops up.
I love it. I'm going to include all that in the show notes, like I said, and
Thanks,
I
man.
promise to do it.
Oh, man, it'd be awesome.
But I've also seen clips from Podcast Simulator. I think I've seen several episodes worth. One specifically that I saw was that you did with Ranch.
Yes.
Producer, engineer of Get Played, or engineer of Get Played.
Rochelle Chen from Get Played.
It was that and another moment from another clip that I saw. Felt like someone was in like a pressure cooker of like a just decision to make for it.
Yes. A lot of what I will put in the simulators, I'm trying to do a better job of not doing this. Although I do find this is a chunk of podcast producing is, I don't want to say like moral dilemmas, but like the host asks you to do a thing and you're not sure if it's the right thing to do. Do you do it or do you don't do it? And so I've basically just done very exaggerated versions of that. A recent example is like when I had our friend Matt Apodaca on, the host wanted to record an episode driving his Maserati or something. And then Matt was jokingly like, am I going to die recording a podcast? And he was like, screw it, let's do it. He clicked yes. And then he dies.
Yes.
The result is like RIP. It was a great episode though. They were able to recover the SD card. A lot of it is sometimes like exaggerated social dilemmas. Yes. But that is, I promise that's not all of what podcast producing is.
It even has my brain just clicking on, this is where I take the part of my show to be like, hey, Kev, here's pitches for your show. Yeah. But that even makes me think of the possibilities because it's just such a great idea.
Thanks, man. It's a lot of fun.
Well, congrats on getting it off the ground. I'll put links in the show notes. We are about to, talk about a little bit of your history with video games in general.
Yep.
But before we do, you have brought on a game to discuss for the main event later.
Yes.
So will you do me a favor and call me by your game?
Yes. The game that I brought today is NBA Street Volume 2.
Can't wait. And one of these selfish episodes, as I say occasionally, where it's a game that I have had a lot of time with, although it's been decades at this point.
Me too.
I'm glad you brought it on. But before we talk about that, let's go into your general history. Kev, do you have some like early memories, whether it be watching or playing games that you want to bring up?
Earliest, probably not the earliest, but big staple for me in the late 90s was definitely getting a Nintendo 64 and having a lot of, this is a quick side tangent.
Sure.
Do you like horror movies?
I have started to like them more is what I'll say.
I hate them. I specifically hate jump scares.
Yes.
And I blame Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. Now, I've talked to my wife about this, and she has said, almost as like a form of the therapy where they bring you back to the thing. I forgot what it's called.
Exposure therapy?
Exposure therapy. Yeah. She was like, well, let's watch the jump scare you're talking about in Banjo-Kazooie. And it is the witch who basically her face takes up the entire screen.
Okay.
The same thing with the more obvious in Mario 64 of like Bowser taking up the entire screen and stuff. And the way that my wife lovingly laughed out loud, she was like, that's not a jump scare. That is an entire face just taking up an entire screen. However, it was so horrifying to me that I was like, so I got Banjo-Kazooie for my birthday, and it was probably the most mature thing I've ever done in my life. I think I was 8 years old, maybe 9. I opened it up, started playing it, loved it. The witch's face takes up the entire screen. I put the game back in the box, and as a second grader, handed the game that I wanted so bad to my mom. I did not say return it. I said, you have to hide this. I can't, I'm not ready to play this.
Yes.
So she put Banjo-Kazooie back in a closet for like a year until I was a little more of a big boy to be able to watch it. Definitely Super Smash Bros. Was huge. I made a list. I just have a list on my phone that I made. I made a list on November 6, 2022, just called Favorite Games.
All right. My kind of notes app note.
Tony Hawk Pro Skater, NFL Blitz, NBA Street, Super Smash, Sonic. So basically, early video game memories were definitely Game Boy was probably the first.
Yes.
A Game Boy Color and N64, like Pokemon was huge.
Oh, yes.
And then that went into N64, and then GameCube, then PlayStation 2. And so, a lot of Pokemon, Mario Kart, Super Smash. Loved video games so much. Was like a huge part of my life and all of my friends as well. So many positive experiences playing video games. Then in high school, I don't know what clicked for me, but I would almost call this the inverse of a click.
Yeah. Detach.
Something, it must have been like a social pressure.
Yeah.
But at 17, I was a junior in high school. I said, I have to stop playing video games. It's going to cripple my social status, which I was in marching band. So it's not like I was running for, prom king or anything.
Sure, yes.
But I sold my Xbox 360 and my PlayStation and all of my games at 17 and was like, I'm done. I'm taking a stand. I'm playing too many video games. I'm
about to be a man.
Yeah, I'm going to be so adult, so impressive. And I bought a pair of like cool Nike shoes and I was like, well, I've definitely like gone up 10x socially.
Yes.
Nothing changed at all. And then I truly took like a 5-year break from video games. And then
we call those the dark period on the podcast.
It was a dark period. It was a boring period. Well, especially I went to a college in Illinois called Northern Illinois University.
Hey,
Everyone
beat Notre Dame this year.
Yeah, the only team to beat them. My dad really wanted Notre Dame to be in the Rose Bowl game that we went to, just so he could, if Notre Dame lost, he could say, NIU could have probably won the Rose Bowl. But everyone brought their N64s, which was kind of fun. So a lot of people on my floor had like Super Smash and like GameCube and stuff. People weren't really bringing like Xbox 360s and PlayStation 3s and stuff. It was very like a little more retro, which was pretty fun. But then I didn't get back into video games until Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh.
At that point, I was like, oh, this looks cool. I think it was, I don't remember if it was Amazing Spider-Man or Breath of the Wild, but both of those around 2015, 2016, for me, probably 2016, doesn't matter. I think I was like ready for the dark ages to be over.
Sure, yeah.
So then I got a Switch and a PS4.
All right.
And then I was like deep back in.
Yeah.
And then, and basically have been gaming since. So I have a PS5 now. I have a pretty janky Nintendo Switch, that same one from like 8 years ago.
Yes.
That I'm not sure if all the buttons still work, but kind of a interesting arc of, age like 7 to 17, deep in, took 6 years off, and now I'm back in. Like most people, I think, got really in during COVID. COVID was like a great time for gaming for me. I took a lot of pride in beating The Last of Us Part 2 in 2 days. I bought it on
Did you need an emotional detox after those 2 days?
Oh yeah, totally. I bought it on a Friday or like a Saturday morning at like 10 a.m. Played it till 2 a.m. Went to bed, woke up, and then played it again till like I think 4 a.m. the next day. And that was definitely like an era of me in a gaming era where, and I know I'm not the first person to think this, but what was really exciting to me in this phase of gaming was realizing like how powerful of like storytelling can be, because so much of my gaming experience was like skateboarding, NFL Blitz, and Super Smash. You're not really there for like a page turning story, but God of War, the 2018 God of War, I was like, this is beautiful. And then Last of Us, specifically Last of Us Part 2, then I started to like understand how emotion and story can be such a huge part of a video game.
Yeah.
And so that's been a very like fun part of gaming for me, is sometimes I will just watch like full playthroughs of games that I would like to play, but I'm just like, I don't have 40 hours, but I'm interested in the story of this game. I've never played a Metal Gear Solid game, but I've watched so much of the like 40-minute, like a 40-minute cutscene where I'm just like, this is a full movie in the middle of the game. Stuff like that I think is super cool. So
that's fascinating. And it makes a lot of sense too. I feel like something else you could dip in if you are looking for more like sort of narrative driven stuff like you've come to really enjoy. But only have a certain amount of time. I think there are some great indies out there that would really strike a chord with you.
Definitely like an area that I want to get in, because now I almost have the opposite issue of I'm very fascinated in the next generation of gamers that grew up with these massive open world, like Elden Ring-esque, like 150-hour games, which I guess, we probably had that. It's funny, we probably played 150 hours of games, but it was just like a Super Smash Bros. Like over and over and over again thing, like perfecting a very, like a 3-minute thing.
I put 150 hours into fighting Donkey Kong on the Great Fox.
Yeah, me too with like Star Fox. But I get so overwhelmed at the thought of trying a game that I'm like, I just know Persona 5 or like a Metaphor Refantasio, where part of it, or Baldur's Gate, part of it is, in order to have the best possible experience with it, it would be ideal to spend a few months playing the game, which I would love to in theory. I think I get more intimidated starting a game than I do maybe like a TV show or a movie, just because I'm like, the day I'm able to pull this sentence out of my brain, I can't believe how many more hours I have to play of this game. I will play so many more games because that is the thing over and over again, that I will like start a game and then just go, this is going to take so long. Yeah. And then I chicken out and then I stop.
Well, it is, to be fair, a much bigger commitment than a movie or a book, especially just the amount of hours we're talking about putting into some of these things. So that makes a lot of sense to me too. And it's the reason that I have so many rainy day games. Yep. I'll just name one that every time I tell someone who I'm talking about this, they're like, you're a gamer and you haven't played Red Dead 2. Oh, yeah. And the reason I haven't played Red Dead 2 is because it's an enormous commitment. I know I'm going to love it, but I need to have the time and space to do it. So there's kind of an intimidation factor of exactly that.
And that's a great example, because I went right into Amazing Spider-Man, right into Red Dead, and I hated it because I was going through the freaking 5 boroughs in 30 seconds, and then getting on this horse, I was like, this is so painfully slow that I stopped Red Dead for a year, and I was just like, can't play this. Spider-Man's way faster than freaking Arthur Morgan. But then I came back, and when I was just a little, probably had some edibles, and was like, you know what? Just ride the horse, man. Yeah. And then I really enjoyed it. Another great storytelling example where it was just like, I got hooked on that. But another like huge open world game where if you're not in the right headspace for it, it's just like, it's too intimidating.
Definitely. You getting into this conversation, it was great. You kind of gave me like a roadmap of your history. And now I think at this point, I want to ask a couple questions about some periods of your life when it comes to gaming. Just a few before we move on to the next part of the podcast. And the first is, one thing I just wanted to bring up, talking about jump scares in early N64 games. Yep. It's funny because I thought you were, when talking about Mario 64, I thought you were going to refer to the moment where with the giant piano in that one room in Big Boo's haunt. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Vaguely.
That actually is a jump scare where you're just walking around behind a piano to go get a red coin in this level, and suddenly it starts like chomping at you like a dog.
Ooh. Oh, yeah.
Very scary, visceral moment. But I also know what you're talking about with the Bowser. If you die like Bowser coming on the screen, it's just his face.
And the laugh.
Yes. So when looking at this, I want to ask about the time at Northern Illinois a little bit, and everyone bringing sort of their retro consoles. Yeah. Because we had a similar thing at my school where some people brought retro stuff. Some people were bringing like Xbox 360s and playing the newest Halo. When you think back to that time of playing with people there, was it a lot of multiplayer gaming sessions? Was anyone or yourself sinking into a single player game?
Mostly like kind of party game, Mario Party style stuff, where it would be 4 or 5 guys all kind of like in one room on like the 2 dorm beds with like Doritos and like a Mike's Hard Lemonade. Like, I can't do 2, I'll get crazy drunk. And mostly kind of alternating between Super Smash, like a Mario Party, some basketball games as well. And quick side tangent, my roommate at the time, a great guy that I went to high school with, college was not a good match for him. He learned pretty quickly. And one of the ways this showed was the week of finals, the 3 semesters he went there, he would pick up a new hobby the week of finals. One week one semester it was learning to whistle with your fingers. And he spent like 8 hours a day trying to master it. And another one, the end of freshman year, was he got really into the game Minecraft.
Okay.
And he was not a gamer.
Yes.
And all of a sudden got really into Minecraft for 10 days. So that was kind of the only person who got really into a single game.
Sure.
Was my roommate Mark putting 100 hours into Minecraft the week of finals, but it was mostly kind of party game stuff. Halo was a lot of junior high and high school.
Okay.
Didn't really play. I've never been like a big online gamer. I think part of it is I know I'm not very skilled, and so I just didn't like getting cooked so quickly.
Yes.
By kids like laughing at me. And so it was a lot of I like campaign and co-op modes a lot. And so if we were playing like a Halo or something, I think I was always quick to be like, let's do co-op or something, instead of trying to get on the dorm's Wi-Fi to get smoked really quick. But yeah, more like communal party game. I don't know why I keep saying party game, but it was just more of a like, let's all hang out and play something that everyone can enjoy, instead of a little more of like a challenging, tough game, basically.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Looking a little more far in the future, you know, now that you're in this space where you're back into gaming a bit, has there been a game you've been playing in the last few months that has your attention?
It's a weird one. It's a very popular one, but it is a very funny game to me. I want to talk about a different funny game to me. But I have been enjoying Grand Theft Auto 5. Because a thing that I've like learned about myself is my attention span, it varies so wildly, where sometimes I will just turn on my PlayStation and let the updates download with the full intention of like, well, I'm turning it on and I'm probably going to play for the next 4.5 hours. And what I do is I turn it on and I see I have 3 updates that need to download. And then I will watch them download and go, great, they all downloaded. Well, time for bed. And then I'll just turn it off. Like the amount of times I turn it on and we'll just kind of like organize things on the dashboard and then turn it off is bizarre. I feel like I should just get a puzzle or something. But what I like about Grand Theft Auto, and I've never played Fortnite, but I imagine it's a similar thing of I can play it for 10 minutes or I can play it for 2 hours. And so it is kind of fun. And again, it's just like a similar open world game that should intimidate me. And it probably is a reason why sometimes I clock out after like 15 minutes is I'll have that thought and go, no, just turn it off. But it is fun sometimes just like hopping in a car, driving around for 10 minutes, evading the cops like twice and then turning it off. Or sometimes I will like turn it on, play through like a chunk of the campaign and go like, that was really fun. And then similarly, like just turn it off. I also like that you can kind of toggle between these 3 players.
That's right.
And so that's been pretty fun for me. I never played, I don't think I played 4 or 5. I had a very fun 7th grade summer where I discovered the show Arrested Development, the band The Strokes, and Grand Theft Auto the same summer.
Incredible. It's like you're summoning a good spirit there.
Yeah, I kind of created my personality that summer. And so that game is fun and funny to me. Another game that I find very funny, if someone were to ask me what is the funniest video game of all time, I would say it's Luigi's Mansion.
Okay.
Because it is a character who is very scared. Again, going back to horror for me, very scared, and he's in a scary mansion, and he's never like not scared. Like at the end of the game, it's not like, well, I'm brave now.
Yeah.
He's just a guy who is constantly scared going into, it's my worst nightmare, but his reactions are so funny to me. I'm truly like, I think this is a brilliant game.
It is, and it's that whole series is very charming.
Yes, it is.
It just and it was kind of the place where Luigi adopted that sort of scared personality in the first one. Before then, I don't remember if there was much definition to him other than being the taller brother who could jump higher.
Yes,
and I guess technically the younger brother. But have you played? Was it like the original that you played, or you played the new one? 3?
I've done both, I think.
Yeah.
I think I have 3 on my Switch, and then I played the original on GameCube. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think I found it as funny when I was a kid. I was just like, whatever. But thinking about that game a lot for some reason recently, probably because I got 3, and was just like, this is funny. He's just a little scaredy cat stuck in a mansion. But yeah, Grand Theft Auto right now. Oh, I'm playing Black Myth Wukong.
Okay.
And there was another one, Ghost of Tsushima I just beat.
Wow.
And so I really enjoyed that. And Black Myth Wukong's pretty cool. And I kind of go in waves. I feel like with my gaming, I would love to be able to, and this is part of why I'm doing more Twitch stuff, is force myself, is what we were talking about earlier too, with like podcasting, is sometimes I want to almost force myself to play games.
Sure.
Because I love video games so much, but I just run out of time. And then I get into a period where it's like, oh man, it's fine, whatever. But it's like, oh, it's been 4 months and I haven't really played any video games. That's a bummer to me. And I listen to a bunch of video game podcasts like yourself. I also find like YouTube video game world really fun and fascinating. I'm a big fan of Action Button, Tim Rogers.
Hello.
Yeah. His videos I think are really impressive.
They're so good. Have you sat and watched some of those extremely long videos?
I've watched the 8-part Cyberpunk series like multiple times. I will put that on in the background the way people will put on like Friends or Sex and the City.
Yes.
I'll just be like, part 4 about the graphics. I'm going to just have that on as I fall asleep.
Yes.
And that kind of gets me back into video games. Jake Baldino, I think his name is, and the Gamer Ranks or Gamer RX or something. A lot of fun. The crossover of YouTube and video games is really fun for me to, I don't know, just have on in the background all the time.
Totally.
It's very impressive, like research and stuff. So, sorry, I'm a little all over the place.
No, you're good.
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto, Black Myth Wukong, Ghost of Tsushima. Those have been like the latest 3.
Cool.
And I don't know what I'm gonna do next.
That was kind of what I was going to ask was, is there a game that the final question of this part is there a game that you are interested in playing, whether it's coming out soon or that you've had on your backlog?
Probably. I might have a list somewhere. You know what? I'm sure there's so many cool games. Probably, when the new Death Stranding comes out, talk about amazing storytelling. There's going to be a lot of games that come out this year that I think are going to be really fun. Same with, is the new Ghost of Tsushima game coming out this year? Ghost of
if not this year, then the following, I think.
Yeah, that one's going to be amazing. And however, I would love to get more into I don't want to say retro gaming, but just like I had the song Fairy Fountain from Ocarina of Time play at my wedding, and I've never played that game all the way through.
Interesting.
I just love a huge poser, and part of it I think was
don't come for him.
I think part of it was Scott Pilgrim versus the World that plays in that too.
Oh yes.
And I've played the game. I've just never like started and beat it. And I have various Zelda books in my house, and I love the music so much. And I thought it'd be fun to just have that playing as people were like entering the wedding venue. I would love to go through and play like a bunch of the Zelda games, and a lot of these games that I kind of dabbled with in my childhood, like other like, Donkey Kong games and stuff like that. I think would be very fun to kind of revisit and explore in a much more thorough way than I haven't before. Oh, one other thing that I'm playing right now.
Yeah.
I think it is so cool that Nintendo Switch has that Nintendo Online thing where you can just play all of these like Game Boy games and Super Nintendo games. I think it's really fun. So I am playing Mario Golf and Mario Tennis right now, and it is so oddly soothing to me.
Yes.
My wife laughed very hard because I was playing in bed and she rolled over and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm playing Mario Golf." She's like, "How's it going?" And I said with like 100% seriousness, I'm like, "Luigi is kicking my fucking ass." And it was just like, Jesus Christ.
Dude, those games are fantastic. I grew up with those two titles. And
yeah, me too.
A couple things that strike me about those is that, this is more of a fun fact. Did you know that Waluigi made his debut period in the Mario series in Mario Tennis because Wario needed a doubles partner?
Wow.
And so they created Waluigi. And then the other thing is something that really tickles me about the golf series is that how you can play as Yoshi, Bowser, Mario, or a guy named Charlie.
Yeah. Yep. Those are like the first four. There's like a woman named Stephanie or something. And it's like, who are these two? It's very odd. The thing that I'm, and similar, I revisited Star Fox 64. It's very fun, like revisiting these Nintendo games that were like big parts of my childhood. The thing that I've noticed about it, and it might just be the Nintendo Switch, the Joy-Cons or something. They're both easier and so much harder than playing a Grand Theft Auto or like Black Myth Wukong, where those games, like what you're doing is so much more complicated. But if you, like when I'm trying to sink a 30-foot putt and I click a quarter of a second too soon and I just go flying off the green, I'm like, how was I that far off?
Yes.
The like control that you have to have with those games is so much more challenging than I remembered, in a way that is both like fun because it feels a little more simple, but sometimes I'm just like, I don't know how I did this as a kid.
Yes, truly. The precision you have to have in some of those, like especially you're talking about Mario Golf and the shots, is devastating. This last year, actually, for the first time, played a ton of the sequel, Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, for the GameCube.
Okay, I think I played that one.
You would, if you like the 64 game, Toadstool Tour, I think in every single way is better. Yeah. Even with a little more precision, so you don't feel like you still will make mistakes in a swing or a putt, but it feels like you at least understand your mistake.
Did you play Strikers, the soccer one too?
I am only familiar with Strikers.
That one was pretty fun. I was oddly impressed with how good of like sports games, and I think it's similarly a little bit connected to the NBA Street, which I think very stupidly put those characters in Volume 3.
Yes.
Made no sense at all. But I think the thing, like the comparison that was enjoyable for me, someone who's like not a big, sports guy, is because they made them both like a little more extreme and a little more, I don't want to say silly, but just like wild, basically. It made it, like I probably played more soccer, golf, and tennis in my life and just as a gamer because of those games. Yes. Than if I were to play like a Tiger Woods golf game or something like that.
There's really something to the sports games that are more arcadey in their feel than like a simulation that does make it way more fun. And I like occasionally like a simulation sports game, but it's arcade is where it's been at for me.
Me too. Have you played, that being said, like 2 years ago, I did buy, and I think it's because I work with Carl Tart a lot, I did buy the Madden game, like Madden 22, and then like the MLB The Show. And I was laughing because the career mode simulator is so, I don't want to say real. I think they tried to make it like very realistic, but just the amount of time you spend contemplating brand deals was very funny to me.
Yes.
Of just like, well, I told Patrick Mahomes I would do this charity game in Hawaii, but I also told Nike I would do a meet and greet in Toledo. Which do I choose? And I'm like, this is crazy.
Yes, this is so becoming funny. Like a life simulator.
Yes.
That's so funny.
Yeah, those games, like you said, they're fun. The Maddens and the shows and stuff. I think they're fun for like a single game. For me, I'm going to say something very controversial. To me, they're the same as like the Beatles. Not because they're the GOAT, because after a Beatles album, I go, that was great. That's all I want to listen to today. Yeah. You don't see me, and this is me. I'm speaking as me, Chef Kevin Bartelt. I'm not putting on multiple Beatles albums in a single day. If I listen to the Beatles, I'll listen to a few songs and go, that was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And then I listen to something else. It's the same for Madden and the show. I go, that was a lot of fun. I'm not doing any more.
Yes. And it sounds like it's not necessarily you're like, oh, my appetite was quenched here by this one game. It's more of a taste thing where you're just like, that was good for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was good.
I understand that.
And I understand why people love this, but all I'm going to do is play like a single game and then move on to something a little more
not something
silly.
That you're going to binge.
Yeah. Listen to, Korn, the class.
over and over. Well, even talking about all of this, getting into a little sports talk makes me feel like it's a good time to move on to our main event today.
Let's do it.
And like we already previewed, we're going to be discussing NBA Street Volume 2. Kevin, like I told you, I'm going to do a little table setting for the listener. But if you want to jump in on some of this these basic facts or add anything, you've got the green light. Because I know you watched a video on it last night.
I did. I watched the Ringer NBA 40-minute kind of history of Volume 2, which I think provided a lot of helpful context.
Yeah, I'm going to put a link to that in the description of this show
so that
people can watch it because it was so good. Without further ado, here I go. NBA Street Volume 2 is a basketball video game developed by NewFX and EA Canada and published by Electronic Arts under the EA Sports Big, it's the only way to say that, label.
Yeah.
It's the sequel to the original game and, of course, the second in the series. It was released on April 29th, 2003 for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox, and only the PlayStation 2 version was released in Japan. The GameCube version was planned for release in that region but was canceled and followed by this game, of course, as we've kind of talked about, NBA Street Volume 3 was followed up by that, I believe, the next year. NBA Street Volume 2 builds on many aspects of the original title, featuring a 3-on-3 basketball game in a street style from an era where street ball with a focus on flash ball handling and a more freestyle of basketball was huge. This is a little off topic. Did you ever are you familiar with the And One Street Tour, all that stuff?
That was a huge part of my junior high experience. I thought that was so cool.
Yes.
And my friends and I would try to recreate those moves all the time. And so that being introduced to my life in 6th, 7th grade, and then these games coming out at the same period was just
perfect storm, sort of.
The most basketball I'd ever consumed in my life.
Yes.
It was just so fun. And something we'll talk about too, and they talk about that in the video, is just the artsiness of the style of it was super fun. So the And One mixtape stuff and NBA Street was just perfect, a great 4 or 5 year period for basketball.
Yeah. I've got just a little more I'm going to share, but what I want to say about you talking about wanting to emulate the moves you saw, because I went through the same thing. Yeah. It's kind of reminiscent of me and friends going through skateboarding phases after Tony Hawk.
Same. Yep.
Of
100%.
I want to do a kickflip. Or I want to, I guess dribble the ball, throw the ball between someone's legs or bounce it off my knee or something
do a
silly.
handstand where I'm holding the ball.
Not something I ever tried. To finish this off, the game was known for its game breaker feature, where after building a meter up, a player could perform a devastating scoring move and add more points than usual to their score, and even subtract points from the opponent's score.
Did they have that in the first game, or was that just Volume 2 where they introduced
I think it was in both games.
Yeah. Okay.
But was included in this one too.
Okay.
Current teams and players were included along with basketball legends from the past, and even rapper Nelly and the rest of the St. Lunatics were included as playable characters.
Wild.
Kev, as far as just like basic history and context for this game, is there anything you want to include before we get into your time with it?
I think that's mostly it. Yeah, just that period of, and kind of what we're talking about with the Madden and the show and stuff, of just taking a sport that I was playing. I did play basketball from like first grade through eighth grade. And I was like, fine. I wasn't on like the A team.
Yeah.
I was only on it. I only made the A team like 1 year, and then I was like basically benched the whole season. So I was like, I was good. I was like one of the better players on the B team, and then like one of the worst players on the A team. And so I was like good enough that I, could like kind of hold my own, especially with like all of my friends were all like of a similar skill set.
Yes.
And so this kind of like fifth grade time, because I was born in 92, this kind of like early 2000s time period for me, where I would like put on ESPN, watch like The Professor and Escalade and Spida and stuff do all these like insane moves, and was like, that is so, it was, I feel like our Harlem Globetrotters.
Yes.
Just like super creative, like at times like funny, I don't know, like super show off, cool moves, combined with the sport that I was like actively playing. I got like a basketball hoop in my driveway, like my best friend did as well. And so we would just kind of go over to each other's place. The other thing I loved about, basketball hoops, that the ones that we had too, most people have it like this, but you could have the rim be like 5 feet off the ground.
Yes.
So for guys that were like, 4'10", being able to dunk at a time where like you were playing games like this, where dunking was such a huge part of it, throwing it off the backboard and dunking and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And alley-oops. Like if we played at the park, you couldn't do that because they were like regulation hoops, but being able to like play in your driveway where you could crank the rim at like to be like child level basically was super fun. And so we were, trying our best to recreate these moves that were, for the most part, physically impossible.
Yes.
I will say one rule that we kind of had that was never spoken, but was kind of agreed upon was if you attempted an off the heezy, which is throwing the ball off of the person's head, as a defensive player, you did have the right to tackle the person. And so
feels like a fair trade-off.
Whenever that was attempted, like whipping a fucking ball off of like your friend's glasses, essentially, you were allowed to just tackle the guy. And so we kind of like took it easy on the off the heezy attempts. But yeah, man, it was so much fun. And same, I was going to make the Tony Hawk comparison too.
Oh, sure.
The playing those games, Pro Skater games and Underground and stuff, definitely inspired all of us to like get really into skateboarding. And I think like the comparison is, and they talk about this in the Ringer video, is bringing like style and like a cool art element to these a very traditional sport of basketball, and then skateboarding, which has always been pretty cool, but like street skateboarding just made it like so much more interesting than just like a boring 3-on-3 game.
Definitely.
Like now you're able to me, the thing that always blew my mind was like the fact that you could daisy chain alley-oops, where you could do like a trip, like you throw up a ball to someone and then when he's in the air, he throws it to someone else. Like you're just defying gravity in so many ways. So like stuff like that just made basketball and skateboarding like so much more fun to me.
Definitely. So. It gave it a flourish that I think in this era, as we're even talking about this, and I didn't watch the whole video, so this might even be stuff that they bring up, but this era of where MTV had been around for decades,
Yep.
but where MTV had this focus on sort of like whether it was cribs or just video that I feel like we were seeing of skate videos and all this stuff had such a similar feel to it. And like, I think helped build up this, I don't know, this, or maybe bring to light rather than build up this culture of style that was foreign.
And similar, like for me, VH1's Total Request Live, I would watch that every day of just like, here's the top 5 songs. And we also have LL Cool J who are interviewing and having all these different like, you know, pop stars and rappers and rock bands on. Just felt like that era of TV for us was like so influential. And it just, it felt like a perfect storm of just being able to consume so much like cool stuff.
Yes.
And it wasn't, you know, this is pre-TikTok, Instagram. So it's not like everyone was just watching like these three to four channels at the same time. And then all my friends were playing, you know, there weren't 9,000 video games. We were all playing NFL Blitz a lot and NBA Street and Tony Hawk Pro Skater. We were all playing the same 3 or 4 games. We were all watching the 3 or 4 same shows. And so it created this language that, you know, even though it's like this suburb in Illinois, it felt like we were all kind of on the same wavelength.
Yeah, for better or worse, that time just had like more, there was more ubiquity, I think, with things like that.
Totally.
Of like that, of the common channels or the common activities or the common websites even that we probably would go on as kids compared to the wealth of, you know, what is available now. This whole conversation makes me curious as to how the game itself came into your life. Was it through all like basketball and everything that you had just laid out for us that you were interested in it? Did the game just show up on your doorstep one day?
I wish. I think there was a GameStop that was, I can't believe I didn't go to this place more, but there was a McDonald's in my, like a mile and a half away, and next to it was a GameStop.
Okay.
And so
I think we call that heaven.
I think it was heaven. And the workaround, because as a kid, I couldn't take like major streets on the bike with my friends. And so, however, the workaround was there were side streets you could take to get to this McDonald's. And so we were able to convince my mom, like, we're actually allowed to go because if you take this street, this street, this street, this street, you don't have to take, you know, 75th Street.
We're not breaking your rules, Mom.
Yeah. And so we would go and get like a 10-piece chicken McNugget and then go to the GameStop and then just go like, at that point we had, you know, this is child money where had we not had, not that we were having McDonald's 10 days a week, but if we saved up that McDonald's money, we could probably buy one of those games for one.
Yes.
God, if I had the money, I would get that one and that one and that one. And then you'd go to McDonald's and spend a quarter of that going and I'm going to get a quarter pounder. But there was just like such a fun summer of the bikes with the pegs too and stuff and just like your friends on the back and then going to the McDonald's and then going to that GameStop. And then I think that's just how we discovered most games was that GameStop. And so I think around, you said April 2003. So I imagine that summer we saw the game. And I think we had volume 1 at that time, like my friends and I. And so we were familiar with NBA Street already. And then probably got it that summer. And I imagine just played it nonstop. It was similar to NFL Blitz in that the arcadiness of it made it so much more fun to us than just like a Madden or like a 2K, just like the, you know, traditional game. Being able to like in NFL Blitz have the like huge helmets and your characters like on fire and stuff was very fun for a bunch of 10-year-olds. And so I think a similar thing with the Game Breakers of just being able to do these like, you know, gravity defying moves and stuff was super fun to us. And so there definitely was, we were like a very active friend group. The rule that my mom had is we had to be in an activity every season, which was very easy to, as a kid of like, okay, it's the summer. I'm in 5th grade, I'm in cross country during the summer. So I have to run like 3 months. In hindsight, it was genius parenting because it kept us out of the house like every day of the week, basically. And when we'd come home, we were exhausted.
Yes.
And so it was like in the summer, I was in cross country. In the fall, I was in like not baseball,
Soccer,
football. And then the winter was like basketball. And then the spring was baseball. And so I played a lot of sports as a kid.
Yeah.
And so part of it was like when we were playing NBA Street, we'd play for like, an hour or two and then go outside and then try to recreate those moves and then do like a 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 with the neighbors and then be like, okay, your stretch, I'm Biggie Little. And then, you're going to be this guy. I'm Dr. J. And then you would add in like other, like the And One mixtape people have like, okay, so I'm the professor, but you're Biggie Little.
Yeah.
Just like world colliding. And it was a blast. It definitely was like a fun time. And it introduced me to so much cool music. I mean, a big part of that game specifically was the soundtrack was incredible.
Yes.
They talk about it a lot in the doc of trying to, of how important not only is music to basketball and like in street ball, but just like to what they wanted to bring to the game was such like an important element to it, which is, I think I would make the case most people that I know, when they think of Troy, they reminisce over you, they think of NBA Street Volume 2.
I remember I replayed this game, at least a bit of it about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And had several sessions with it. And I forgot that when you open up that game and get through the opening cutscene, that's the song that sort of plays you into it. And there's an article I'm going to bring up later in the podcast for the fun fact section, but there is such like a warmth and comfort and like smoothness to that song.
Yes.
That it elicits so many feelings for me. And having that be the thing that boots up as you're about to just dive into this jazz of a game, it was so great.
Yeah, the jazz hip hop fusion of it was incredible. And also, and I'm a drummer, and I find music theory very fascinating and fun. I'm definitely very like music pilled on my algorithm. One thing that I think is very fun about that song starts with, and I should have done more research on it, but it starts with like a fade out. And so it kind of starts with that. There's like a 3 or 4 second thing where here, I'll try to not get you demonetized. But you can just kind of hear.
Oh, of course.
So then this just plays for like 4 or 5 seconds. And then it fades out, and then the saxophone starts.
Yeah.
So that's how, I thought that was really cool. And it sounds like this was all, meticulously thought over with all the very talented people they worked with. I don't know how this was planned, but because the game starts with essentially legal disclaimers that were like on the billboards and stuff, that 8-second intro is playing during that part. And it feels like it is both connected and not connected to the song. So when you're seeing the kind of boring parts of a video game of the like any, things that are similar, these characters are mostly original and the NBA ones are, we got legal approval. This is a representation of the 2001-2002 season. That kind of boring information, while that very cool instrumental guitar, funky part, jazz is playing, is under it. And then the song starts when the beginning of the game essentially starts. So just musically, the fact that there's this almost 4-bar intro that is connected to both the game and the song, like the beat. Sorry, I'm not wording this correctly.
No, you're all good.
The song, the intro to the song, and the beginning of the like hard beginning of the song that everyone knows, the saxophone, is perfectly lined up with the beginning of the game and like the hard beginning of the game is just musically very impressive to me. The way they were able to pair the songs with the game, I feel like was, even as a kid, I was like, noticed it in a way that I never thought of with like any other game that I played.
Yeah, even if like maybe you couldn't or could articulate it at the time, like you still felt that.
Yeah, I was like, this is cool. It's cool that, you know, Nelly is playing and Nate Dogg and stuff. And the way that they were able to put another thing in the documentary that's kind of fascinating is the thing that they were trying to have with the game is these kind of like the new style and the old school.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a similar thing with the music in that it is these like cool hip hop songs that also sample older funk songs from the 70s and 80s, or maybe even the 60s. And so it's a similar thing of old school and new school meeting and then having songs that are new cool songs that are sampling old school things.
Yes.
So just kind of like that thought process is very cool to me.
It's so cohesive with both that and like you're saying with the game itself of the style of play while also having, you know, so many legends included in the game. Yeah. And being able to do all these same things with like Moses Malone or Larry Bird or whatever. Totally. Is the melding of those two of old and new. Yeah. Yeah. That's really special.
I think another thing that helped a lot with the game is that you just played to 21. It made it so...
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like, you know, 4 quarters. It just truly felt like you could knock out a game in under 10 minutes.
Definitely.
I think that was another part. I think about the Fortnite-ification of video games and trying to make everything so like bite-sized. And kind of just the two opposite ends of the spectrum of like a game that you can play in 5 minutes and then an Elden Ring, Red Dead, 150 plus hour game. And I just kind of always lean a little bit shorter, a little more like attainable. And I think that was another reason what I loved so much about an NBA Street style game is you could play it with your friends, or when we're replaying it in college, you could play it like in between classes and like, hey, let's just knock out a quick game to 21 and then you're done. It was super fun.
When you think back when you played this game, it sounds like at least part of it was communal with your friends. Did you also do like, did you ever explore like doing a season mode with like a trio of 3 characters? Or
I definitely did the like Be a Legend campaign. I traditionally when I play video games, I feel more comfortable, even though I've just been talking about how much like communal gaming that I've done with like these types of games. I feel more comfortable doing like a campaign mode. And so I definitely enjoyed with this game and with a few others of just starting like a solo, the like Be a Legend mode, and then just kind of working my way up and then working my like skill set up.
Yeah.
There's something that I feel like can get a little embarrassing where you're just like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, but you're with your friends. And so I always like to, with a game like this and a few others, do the career mode and just learn, I don't know, being able to see like the different venues and the different types of players is very fun for me. I feel like I get more of the full experience of a game when I get to do the campaign mode. So that's kind of always my default is if the options are like campaign or like a versus multiplayer, I always lean campaign.
I think that makes so much sense for all sorts of games, even if you were playing like a Call of Duty or a Halo, where it's like I can learn the game and sharpen my skills here. Yep. And then when I am out socially with everybody, like I can hang.
Yeah, I'm not embarrassing myself for sure.
Do you remember specifically? Because I look back and I can remember my like 3 players on my little Be a Legend team. The one time I did it, is that fuzzy in your mind? Do you know those? Fuzzy. Yeah. Were you like creating yourself?
I was watching. I don't think so. I was watching some playthroughs last night. I definitely remember like the stretch guy, like basically Dr. J, and Biggie Little. I think because I was, 4'8" when I was playing these games, I always liked the shorter guys because I was always like, that's me. Who were your three? Do you remember?
Well, I definitely created myself.
Yeah.
For sure, which I love to do. I don't remember what the player's skill set was because I played a little basketball growing up, but was really bad. And now I'm better than I've ever been at basketball.
Wow,
Still
cool.
not good, but I play basically every Sunday.
Amazing.
Anyway, I created myself. I was with, I think his name was like Jonas Valanciunas, or maybe I'm mixing him up with, there was a Cavaliers center who played with LeBron James earlier in his career.
Okay.
This tall European guy. I should have looked it up before. And then I think we also put like 1985 Michael Jordan on the team, which is like, oh, what am I going to do? Not play with Michael Jordan? Yeah.
That was so funny too, that you could just play with like, okay, it's me, it's another guy, and it's Larry Bird or something. Just being able to add the classics in was very cool. I think I played with like Isaiah Thomas.
Oh, nice.
And that was fun, and definitely like a nice, for me, like intro to maybe not intro to basketball, but just being able to, I definitely like learned of players because of that game. Of just like, hey, here's all of the most famous, players in basketball. I also don't know about the legalities, but I'm just assuming it was so much easier to get approval in that time period versus like a today where I imagine it costs like millions of dollars to get the legal rights for some of that stuff. One thing we haven't talked about that they discussed a little in that doc, and then I like kind of forgot about, is the impact of EA Sports Big had on me as a kid.
Ooh.
SSX, Tricky, and SSX 3 were huge games for me as a kid. And I kind of forgot that, like, I didn't really play NFL Street. I had played it a couple times, but, the amount of hours I logged on NBA Street Volume 2, Volume 3 I played, but, didn't like it as much. But SSX Tricky and SSX 3 and a few other of the, like, big games I thought were super fun. Something that's kind of funny to me in the doc is it's a bunch of, like, kind of nerds from Canada who are like, we're trying to get into the Harlem street scene. And it's like, we weren't the right guys for it. Did you play any of the EA Big games?
Definitely. Similar to you, sampled one of the NFL Streets when it was out.
There's like a FIFA Street too, I think.
Oh, yeah? My best friend growing up, Eddie, he's who I got introduced to most of this, including NBA Street. But Tricky and 3. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 3 actually is a game that I really had my deep time with it about a year ago. And did a whole episode on it. Yeah.
Did you play on GameCube or PlayStation?
I played it on GameCube, yeah.
I got to get a GameCube back.
Did you, but growing up, I'm assuming you were playing all this on your GameCube, or was it PS2? Okay.
90% of it was GameCube.
Yeah.
Just a lot of fun memories with like Sonic Adventure 2, Super Smash, and then NBA Street Volume 2, and then SSX 3. I logged a lot of time on like those 4 specifically. And similar with the music was just like learning of, and obviously with Tony Hawk, a similar thing of those playlists, like those soundtracks were just like as a guy who was getting into music more and more, that was such a fun way to learn about like, I don't know, like random artists and stuff. And so, yeah, SSX 3 was really cool to me.
I loved it. This has come up a couple times, and I didn't jump on it earlier, but there's this idea that you've discussed about these types of games, or games in general, introducing us to new things, whether it be music or like history of like basketball, like legends. And that's something that I really am glad that I also took away from it too. Yeah. Because it got me into, I mean, this is like, I think, part of the whole Tony Hawk phenomenon.
Sure.
But was like my music taste for a bit was what's on Tony Hawk and what are those albums?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people experienced it. I want to dive into a little more context, if we can, too, from your life. The way I want to start by doing that is having you scene paint for me the room where this GameCube would have been set up at your house.
Yes.
And like just like give me an idea, put me in that place.
It was I was fortunate in that I was able to have a TV not much bigger than this little monitor that's in front of us in my bedroom. And so I was able to put my GameCube in there. And so a lot of like I don't know why my parents were okay with this. I think they were just tired of, we had one TV kind of period for a long period of time. I guess my parents had one in their room, but our living room TV, I just fully monopolized it with N64. And
That's
so
familiar.
they couldn't watch anything. Like they'd want to watch the news. I'm like, I need 20 more minutes. And I'm like, we're the fucking parents, bitch. Like, get out. And so I think they were tired of anytime they wanted to watch TV, I was using it. And so they bought me like the cheapest, smallest TV they could find, put it in my bedroom, and were like, play video games in here.
Yes.
I'm sure it was me begging as well.
Totally.
That I wanted my own TV. So eventually I got to put my GameCube in there, and I would just sit at the edge of my bed and play GameCube for hours on end. And so that's where I played. I remember my dad getting ready to yell at me because I was playing Volume 2, and he left and he went to like a baseball game. He like went to Wrigley Field, watched the Cubs, came back, and I was still seated. As he inhaled to go, what the hell? I clarified, I actually hung out with Colin for a couple hours, and I know what this looks like, but I have not been playing for 7 straight hours, even though I easily could.
Yes.
I had to clarify, like, I know what this looks like. I took a break. I went outside. That was a big thing with my parents too, was like, they were fine with video games. They were just like, you have to go outside.
Yes.
And so as long as I spent like an equal amount of time, like outside with my friends, they were pretty cool with gaming.
I had a similar thing where it was like, just break up the activity here.
Yes.
Like they even had warmed up to me gaming more as it became a true hobby of mine.
Yeah.
But it was like, go outside, read, do something else.
Yeah.
From this time in your life too, you've already given me so much great context, from like stories of your friends to this like moment with your dad coming home from Wrigley Field.
Yep.
Are there any other either broad details from like that time in your life, solo or with your friends, that you remember, or are there specific memories that you can pull from surrounding this game?
Similar, like the influence of And One's mixtapes were really fun. We weirdly played a lot of, it's just very funny thinking of how much sports influenced my childhood, because I went to the Rose Bowl game on New Year's, and I was telling my wife, I was like, I haven't been to a football game in like 15 years.
I think one of the first things you said to me today was, I'm not a big sports guy.
No, and I do work on 2 weekly sports podcasts, mind you. And so a kind of funny experience I had with one of the shows I work on with Carl, Foosballs, is I don't watch sports, and my dad has a YouTube TV account. And so I guess with it comes with like a couple different accounts. And when he was over here last, he was like, I think I can like connect it to your email address if you want to have YouTube TV on here. I was like, sure, why would I say no? And so it like added to my Apple TV, and I was watching an NFL game for the first time, I think ever, in LA. And I described it as like Jason Bourne, like realizing he has all of the skills, because they've done 75 episodes of this podcast.
Yes.
So for 75 straight weeks, I have heard the names of like NFL players like over and over and over again. And then so turning on a game and then being able to connect all of the names to the faces and stuff.
Yes.
It was oddly cathartic and kind of fun. But as a kid, I wanted to be the bat boy for the Chicago Cubs. I memorized the lineups. I would like follow them meticulously. You know,
do you have the quick question for you, not to get you off track? looking back, do you have a favorite Cubs team or like a year you were like, that was my team?
I mean, I loved Sammy Sosa. So probably like a 2001. I watched the game where they were like in the I think it was playoffs, the Moises Alou,
2003,
Steve Bartman.
Yes.
I actually did a sketch that's on my YouTube channel 9 years ago as Steve Bartman that he started a new business basically.
Okay.
It was a very deep cut sketch. But yeah, that era was like a lot of fun for me and would like go to games with my dad and really enjoyed it. And then played baseball as a kid. And so, yeah, basketball and baseball and football were super influential. Watched like Sports Center every morning and stuff. And then, yeah, once I got into like drumming, I was like, I unfortunately, I started to associate sports with like jocks.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm not a jock, but I didn't really know jocks. So it was kind of like I don't know, maybe it was like a movie that I watched or something that was just like some 90s movie and was like, oh, I'm a sensitive musician. And then I just fully shut out sports like sense in a way that if I were to do it over again, I think I would have been like, you could still follow it. You don't have to like, I do that sometimes where I go like a little too like, a good example of this is when I was 20, my friends, we made a bet about not eating meat. We were at Portillo's, enjoying some hot dogs and, beef and stuff. And then they were like, hey, we all see each other and like, cause we went to college together. It was like the summertime. We were like, hey, we're not going to see each other for 6 weeks. Let's make a bet about like who cannot eat meat again. Like the conversation came up kind of organically. And then one of them just said like, all right, let's bet $20 to see who cannot eat meat. So 6 weeks goes by and then I see them all again 6 weeks later. And I'm like, hey, how's everyone doing with the bet? And they all go, what bet? And I'm like, I haven't ate meat in 6 weeks. And they're like, oh yeah. They were like kind of like, dude, I went to Taco Bell like that night and broke it. And I'm not exaggerating. I haven't had meat since.
Oh my God.
And so I've been a vegan.
You can go cold turkey.
I've been a vegan for 8 years and I was a vegetarian for 5 years before that. And so that was the last time I had meat was that Portillo's hot dog in 2010 or something.
So you can just cut something off.
For better and for worse.
Yes.
Sometimes I do it and then I'm like, I probably shouldn't have cut something off. And with the video games. And when I was 17, I was like, video games are not good for me. I should cut it out. And then just like sold, some guy gave me like $250 who's like, here's the Xbox, here's the PlayStation, here's the games. He gave me like, some money. And then I was like, and then that's out of my life. And then, took a big break from it. And so I do that sometimes and probably shouldn't do it as extreme, but yeah, so I think that kind of influenced me, like getting really into sports as a kid and then less into it and then really into video games and then not into it. I try to be, I'd like to say it's all healthy things. It's not like, I'm very fortunate that it's never been like, Kevin got really into drugs.
Yeah. True.
It's always like hot dogs.
Yes. Sounds like something pretty good. I have a couple last things to present you before we get out of this segment. The last thing is, before I ask you to wrap up your thoughts, are there any other details about your experience with Volume 2 that you'd like to share, whether it be like, a game detail or a contextual thing that you haven't gotten to bring up today?
I don't know why I keep coming back to the creativity of the game, which I know is like not a detail. It's such a vague thing to say, but the hybrid of the music and the combos that you could rack up. My friends and I loved doing the throwing it off the backboard and dunking, and then we would go outside, lower the hoop as low as it could go, and then do that that move. I'm blanking on what it's called. It's not a...
Because it has a more specific name.
Yeah, when you like basically alley-oop it to yourself off the backboard. And so like that was a lot of fun. And just trying to like recreate some of those moves. There was a one that I know they did in the And One mixtape, and then in NBA Street, where you would essentially roll on the ground with the ball.
Oh, yes.
That wasn't a super fun one. And another one where you would bounce it off your knees. Just kind of all these like trick dribbling shots or like moves were super cool to me. In a similar way that I'm not surprised that I found like street skateboarding much more than like vert and ramps and stuff. I found it much more cool to see like, oh, this person did like a kickflip into this move, and just kind of the skill set to be able to rack up all those combos was like super impressive to me in a way that you just don't do in traditional sports. I played basketball for, like I said, like 8 years. One time I dribbled the ball between my legs. And the coach pulled me aside after and was like, don't do that shit.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a coach.
But for years when I would play like in the driveway, that was just all we were doing was like, okay, between the legs to a behind the back, and then I'm going to do an off the heezy. I know he's going to tackle me, but it'll be worth it because I'm going to alley-oop it to the other guy.
Yes.
All of those kind of like combos and stuff was super cool. I think the other thing is, and they talk about this in the doc, is the showmanship of it's not like I guess you would say like the MC, basically the guy with the mic. I think his name is like Bobito, DJ Cucumber Slice. They interview him a lot. That was really cool as well because that brings this level of energy that I think is very applicable actually to podcasting.
Yeah.
Is like the energy you bring to anything can completely change the entire experience. And so if they got a guy that was like 5% less, I think the game would have been vastly different. I still to this day say when I see an in and out, like an in and out is a thing you do in basketball where it's like you pass to someone and then he will maybe pass it back to you kind of like closer to the hoop. He calls it, he goes in and out, like a fast food restaurant. And so that was my introduction to the popular chain In-N-Out.
Yes.
And so when I am driving with my wife and we see an In-N-Out, I go, like a fast food restaurant.
Yes.
And just all of his little complete bizarre things where he's like, you need a fork with that. And they say, because they interview him, there's a string of them where he says like 9 different, like a damn meatball sub sandwich. Someone was like, what's with all the food things? And he went, I'm really hungry.
Yeah. I was hungry when I recorded all those lines.
Yeah.
That's funny. It's funny how I love, I don't know if I love it, but that's something that also has stuck with me from games, which is like little voice clips.
Yes.
From like an MC. Yeah, we talked about Tricky earlier.
Yeah.
But like the guy who's sort of narrating your runs in Tricky, it's kind of a similar thing.
It's a hype man.
Yes.
It's your own personal hype man. And that made it so much more fun because the energy was just so high in a way that other games were just like, it would almost fatigue you because it would just be so boring because it would just be the same 30-yard pass complete.
Yeah.
It's like, who cares? But the way they were able to shout 19 different phrases at you. I think the Ringer doc is called like the many ways to say dunk or something like that because he just had 12 different ways 12 different like words he would use to say dunk. And I thought that was very creative and fun. And there's like people that I think about that like you and I both know. Jacob Wysocki is a great example of this, of like, he's just a guy that's so fun and high energy that you're just like, you just want him around just to see what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a very unique skill set that you can't even like really teach people. So I think it's a thing people just like have of like, a friend who came over, we had some friends over last night, and like one of them specifically, we just know like she's the life of the party. Yeah. She's going to have the craziest stories, and she's going to have like all of the like fun, bizarre things.
Yeah.
And so just like, I think that was like another really fun element to the game as well.
Just makes every moment better.
Yeah.
Well, Kev, as we sort of, wrap up our time discussing this game for you, can you put into words and close out the place that NBA Street Volume 2 had in your life?
Absolutely. I think this NBA Street Volume 2 opened my mind up to the fact that creativity and art can be in everything. So for a sport like basketball, which is an extremely easy to follow game, 5 people try to go over here with the ball, they shoot it, 5 people go back, such back and forth. NBA Street was able to create this whole other game that to me was so impressive and mind-blowing that I would credit it, not single-handedly, obviously, I'm not going to be hyperbolic, but I will credit it as a thing that got me into other like art forms because it was so influential on how it took a thing that I knew and flipped it on its head and made it like so different that I think it's like a good practice and a thing that like, I keep bringing up podcasting of like, what is like a podcast that I work on that I could just flip on its head?
Yeah.
And I think NBA Street was like a great example of that at like a very influential age for me, where it took a thing I knew and just completely changed it. And I think it's a good thing for like anyone to practice is, a thing that you're used to, how can you make it different and even more entertaining or interesting?
I love that. Well said, Kev. Thanks for bringing this game on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
That was so much fun to hear from you.
It was great chatting with you. You're an amazing host, and I had a ton of fun.
Thank you. Well, before we leave, I do have 2 fun post-show segments for you on the podcast. The first of which is, of course, the Fact Me by Your Game segment, where I'm just going to share a fun fact with you about this game. And because you watched the doc, I'll be curious to see if they talked about this.
Okay.
So here we go. Let's go ahead and pull this one up. I have one fact for you today, and I have this titled Nellie's Inclusion Infusion. Is this sounding familiar at all so far?
Not really. I don't think so.
So I actually pulled this from a GQ article from 2018 called The Legend of NBA Street Volume 2, where they interviewed the creators and did a few other, some other research as well. And here goes nothing. NBA Street Volume 2, like many iconic sports games of the era, is known for its fantastic and memorable soundtrack. It included unforgettable songs such as Pete Rock and CL Smooth's They Reminisce Over You, and The Choice Is Yours by Black Sheep.
Yep.
One song by St. Louis rapper Nelly, Not in My House, actually made its debut in this game.
Wow.
Yes. Another song that's just like synonymous with this game.
Yeah.
Let's see. Allegedly, this article reports, during the Nellyville tour while in Vancouver, Nelly and the St. Lunatics made a trip to the EA campus in EA Canada.
Yep.
And I quote, played the crap out of NBA Street, the original. So after this, Nelly promised to write an original song for the second game that they were working on.
Wow.
And thus, Not in My House was born.
That's wild.
Just nuts. I would never have guessed that. And I read this in a few different places, and the first one was on the Wikipedia article of the game, and I was like, I actually need to find another source confirming this, and I found a few, thankfully.
I wonder what other songs were introduced in games like that, because that's a very unique thing, but there are so many games that have hundreds of songs in them. I wouldn't be surprised if, I mean, that's probably the most famous example.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's 10 other people that have like, oh yeah, Gino and my song was introduced in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas or something.
I bet there's some obvious examples I just can't think of.
But that's really cool. I really like the idea of introducing a song in a game like that, and it gives me idea for a Hollywood Handbook episode where we should make an episode for a video game. I think that is a pitch I'm going to bring.
Pocket it, and you heard it here on the show first, folks.
Yeah.
That's it for the Fact Me By Your Game segment. I'll find us.
That's really cool.
I love that one. I'll get us into the final one of the day, and this is the game recommendations. Now, Kevin, as you've heard on the podcast, this is my one forced tie into the movie, Call Me By Your Name, where I am going to treat NBA Street Volume 2 as your passionate summer fling in Italy. Of course, like the movie, the fling is not going to work out. Yep. And in order to help you get over this massive heartbreak you're dealing with, I have 3 potential new flings recommendations that I'm going to present to you. Are you ready to get back out there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So these all have a little something to do with the game we brought on today. The first of which is if you want another arcade basketball bucket of joy, I'm going to recommend a game that came a little later. This was the NBA Jam reboot, which I played on the Nintendo Wii from about 2009, 2010.
Okay.
Did you ever play this one?
I don't think so, no.
It was like, it's truly the closest thing I ever found to the feeling that NBA Street Volume 2 gave me.
Cool.
As far as like, it has different things that make it fun, that make it arcadey, game-breaking moments, of course, like getting on fire.
Yeah.
And it's from, like so many of these licensed sports games, from a really funny time in the game where like Steph Curry's a rookie in the game, but I still would use the Warriors because he was so good at shooting threes even back then. Of course, I'm whipping a Wiimote right here. But just a great arcade game if you ever get the chance to play it. The second of which is actually the funny thing is I originally had SSX3 as a recommendation.
Hell yeah.
And I changed it to make something a little different.
Great.
If you want another game that skirts reality for arcade fun, but taking something we know, like driving, I'll recommend Burnout Paradise. Do you know the Burnout series?
No, I don't.
They are one of the big features of a lot of the games is truly just driving your car as fast as you can into other cars to see how much of damage you can create.
Great.
And it's just a big, fun bucket of points.
That sounds awesome.
Lastly, is if, Kev, the thing you took away from this game was that having the rapper Nelly in NBA Street Volume 2 is not enough. You actually need more. Give me more rappers. Then I'll recommend Def Jam, Fight for New York.
Yes.
Do you know this game?
Yeah. Is this the boxing one where the rappers fight each other?
Yes, it's a fighting game featuring rappers of this same era, actually. Yeah.
That's amazing. They show some clips of it in the doc, and I forgot about it until that they were showing clips, and I was like, oh my God, I forgot this was a game. That's so funny.
Do you know, is Nelly in that one? I didn't look it up to confirm.
He could be. I honestly don't know. But that would be really cool if he was. What a wild game. Truly.
So just to recap your recommendations, we have NBA Jam, the reboot from 2010. We have Burnout Paradise and Def Jam, Fight for New York. That will do it for the Game Rex. And Kevin, that'll actually bring us to the end of the show. So before we go and do our plugs and everything, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to not just be on the show, but to host me in your beautiful space. This has been a blast.
Thanks for being here, man. I'm so glad you're here. This was a really fun chat, and your show's amazing.
Thank you so much.
Honored to be here.
Awesome. Well, we plugged some stuff at the top of the show. Do you want to replug those things now?
Sure. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Chef Kevin, and you can check out my YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing some the podcast simulators you can watch on there. And then also I'm going to be doing some podcast production vlogs on Thursdays as well. So you can check that out. If you just type my name into YouTube, I think it's youtube.com/@Kevin J. Bartelt. But YouTube and Twitch mostly is where you can check me out.
Awesome. I'll be sure that whatever the address is, I have it linked in there for you.
Thanks, buddy.
You betcha. And I'll go ahead and just close this out with some plugs of my own.
Great.
The cover art for Call Me By Your Game is done by the artist Glenn J. You can find him and his other great work on Instagram at Glenn with 2 N's.JAY. The show is produced, edited, and the original music that you hear throughout is done by the great Jeremy Schmidt. You can thank him for his work on this show by listening to his podcast, Video Games, a comedy show, comes out every Monday wherever you get your shows. You can also follow this show all over social media on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, even TikTok. Same goes for the podcast network that we're a part of, Super NPC Radio, wherever you get your stuff. This podcast is also available on YouTube. So if you just listen to the audio version and you want to see a couple of handsome folks talk about NBA Street Volume 2, then please go ahead and check us out on YouTube. You can find me all over social media, including on Twitch at twitch.tv/cons-is-cool69. And lastly, if you're still listening and you like me in the conversations I have with people about video games, check us out on Patreon. That's where we have a bunch of bonus video game podcasts for you. Not just the Games Club, which I told you about earlier. We're gonna be covering Control at the DJ Toad tier for 11 weeks. But also I do a bonus episode of this podcast every month, where last year the theme was sequels, where I sat down with a panel of people and talked about great video game sequels from past years. This year, we're talking about indie games. So check us out there. You might find something you like. But that'll do it for another episode of Call Me By Your Game. We will see you on the next one.